Everyone, let's call the meeting to order at 6:33 of the Montpelier-Roxbury Board of School Directors. Anyone for public comment? Doesn't look like we're on board. Okay. Consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Did we need to add?
I think those items were added in the updated agenda. I definitely, I see at least one of the items. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes.
And what was your first one? Seriously, she has some hand
Merrick, student rep presentation, and
Yes.
do you need?
Both Libby and.
I'm joining Zoom right now,
Okay,
Merrick,
perfect.
to get it up, but you may want to just start talking
Okay.
and then I will pull it up when I am
Alrighty.
into the meeting.
So now that school has started back up, me and Zach are really excited. Okay. Yeah, me and Zach are really excited to be getting back into giving student updates and presentations. So our agenda for this evening is to discuss some current events that I guess are going on in the schools, talk about our goals moving forward, and then think about how precisely to work on those goals and make progress towards them. So our first, I don't know, do you want me to like wait or just continue?
We're good.
Okay, alrighty. So our, yeah. So our first current event, I suppose, and perhaps the most obvious one, is that students across the district went back to school on August 25th. So here's just to a fantastic year and hoping that it's a good one. Also, once again, along with school starting up, fall sports have also started up. So here's some highlights so far at Montpelier High School specifically. Cross country running and boys specifically earned 4th overall at their Essex meet. And girls soccer and field hockey crushed it with their big wins against Middlesex and Harwood respectively. So congrats to them. And also coming up on, or at Montpelier High School on September 15th, the school's holding an open house for the first time in 3 years. So that's pretty exciting to have some of those back into it. So students and parents can really just get to know the school a little better.
And that's not back in action.
Oh, it is on all 4 buildings?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't see any information.
It's not
on
on
that.
that same date, we put them on different dates, so.
Okay, well, yeah, across the district then. And yeah, on September 11th, Club Interact is hosting their 2nd annual walk/run honoring Peyton Smith. And all the proceeds from this event are going to pediatric cancer research. So everyone should come if they can. And this isn't an event, but me and Zach thought we would bring it up anyway. It was really interesting to see that Montpelier Schools is partnering with Talkspace to help promote mental health, and just, I think it'll be a really great resource. So, yeah. So on to some of me and Zach's goals for this year, or just moving forward, is figuring out the, I guess, process for the next student representatives, or if there are reappointments, whatever that may be. We're happy to help out in any way through that process. But in the meantime, we would like to continue holding listening sessions. We'd like to hold listening sessions at all of the schools to just make sure that what our goals are in line with what students are thinking about as well. And when we're hearing that, we don't just want to listen to students, but we also want to support them in any way we can. So helping out their needs and whatever those might be. And along with that, continuing our work towards curriculum/instruction improvements. The word has kind of been a little convoluted, but the desire is still there. So yeah. And then moving on after that to the plans, how we get to making progress on these goals. So for listening sessions, just making sure that we're reaching out to the right people at all the schools. And when we're there, making sure that we're recording all the ideas that we hear and then presenting them back to you guys here on the board. And as for curriculum, continue meeting with the director of curriculum and just trying to support in any way we can, as in line with what students were saying last year. And I'm sure we'll probably hear again this year about instructional concerns or so forth. And and then also through, once again, supporting students, making sure that we're not only listening to them, but also trying to help them and maybe making action plans or whatever that might be to help address their goals or what they want, they're concerned about. That is our presentation for this evening. So thank you guys. And
I'll also
any
say that
questions?
Zach wrote me an email today. I haven't had a chance to write him back, but that Zach has another commitment on the same night for the fall. And so Zach will be kind of sporadically attending and still working with Merrick to design presentations and things like that.
like Zach contributed a lot to this presentation.
Yeah,
So.
still committed to being the school board rep for students, just has a different commitment in the fall.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth just a quick discussion about what we want to do as student reps, because I know we had a process. I mean, I'd be happy to have Merrick and Zach continue, because I know they only had a small portion of last year, and they've done a fantastic job, but I don't know if we want to reopen up the process.
Originally,
Or
we
not.
had talked about it being a 1 semester long commitment. I do think there's an argument to be made that, and I'm sure we all feel it as board members, that the longer you're on the board, the more you sort of understand how it functions, understand your role in it, and you can become, have more leverage to sort of be a change maker. So I do think there could be an argument to be made that it should potentially be a full year, in which case we could extend through this semester. But I also think on the other side of that is to just offer the opportunity to as many people as possible. And if we make it a year-long commitment and there's only 2 student reps, then that's only 2 per year. And I feel like that's pretty minimal in terms of being inclusive of as many students as we can be. So I think it might make sense for me to start by just reaching out to Matt and see what he thinks. And in terms of if we started this process again, I mean, now that Merrick and Zach have done such an amazing job, it may have brought some attention to that role. And so we may not be starting from scratch to sort of build the reputation of what the role is, where I feel like last time it was a little bit more, it was a newer thing that people didn't understand. And there was more questions back and forth between advisors and teachers and students to convince people to apply. So we might not be in that position again.
I would like to empower them instead of going towards, Matt, because I think they're bringing a perspective that we haven't had. I think one semester is not enough to be able to be advocates for other students. They build in the relationship. So I would argue that it's better to have a year and maybe rethink maybe some mentorship program. I think part of what happens often is that we have you and then you graduate and then it's done and you kind of start all over again. But if we can build in a mentorship program with younger years, or if they're doing listening sessions and through that create some mentorship programs so that more people apply next year, I think it gives more voice to more students. I think that there's more creativity around, like maybe you have 4 students that rotate and they work together as a team to create these presentations and that you're actually building. I don't think inclusivity, it's inclusive to just have somebody for 2 months because, or 3, or like 1 semester, that is what, 3 months? You don't really get to, it's like 6 meetings, you don't really get to do much. You kind of break the pace when it comes to listening. So I would argue that instead you have you can have a conversation with the students through those listening sessions to see what they think and then come up with a proposal instead of like us making a decision for them, since now we have them here. So
An idea that you brought up, Emma, right when we first got the positions last year, was having like a subcommittee that the student members would, I guess, head, and then the other people who might not have got it or something, or just maybe whoever's interested could be on that subcommittee. And then, I don't know, after our term ends or something, then they would probably be much more encouraged to apply for the full position. So that's just one idea.
Yeah, I love that idea. We had talked about it as sort of like a council, like, so that there would be students, like Amanda's talking about, younger students sort of understand, you being able to help younger students also understand and stay connected to the process and have a voice.
The State Board of Education has 2 student board members, and when I was working with them, they were for 2 years, but they were staggered. So you always had one student who was sort of coming into their second year and had a little bit more of an understanding, and then a new student. So sort of by default, that student that was in their second year was kind of also a mentor, and that seemed to work really well for the State Board, because I do think it takes a long time to get under. So I like the idea of, like, you know, the senior members mentoring younger members, but it seemed to work well. And 2 years is a long time in someone's high school career, so a lot can happen then. And I really felt like we were pretty consistently able to see the students in their second years really sort of come into their own and advocate. So maybe we could model it after that.
What would be involved in creating a committee? I mean, would it be an official board committee, or would it just, how would that work, forming a student committee?
I'm not sure how it would work. I'm
On a board committee, because there
wouldn't be a
board-
board, yeah, it
formal
wouldn't be a
board
board
members.
members. I want to make sure, I've got a couple, one, I want to make sure there's interest. Second, I kind of agree with Amanda and Jill. I think a semester is not a ton of time to be able to do much. And I think, you know, kind of pre-pandemic, we had a couple student reps who were on for, their junior and senior year, and kind of brought people along. I mean, the other question I have, which is, I mean, really, we're all elected. I think the students kind of represent this, students, that's kind of your role. So having the students not have a role in selecting that person seems a little odd to me. And I'm wondering if there's a way that we can make it somewhat democratic. And my guess is it would oftentimes just be blessing those who are willing and eager to do it, but it would put a little more of a democratic voice on the position.
I thought about that too, like having an election.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure if the board wanted to select that member or members themselves. So.
We had also talked about the possibility, so Zach and Merrick and I talked about election versus appointment, and board appointment versus, student appointment type of thing. And one issue that was raised was the possibility of it sort of becoming a little bit of a popularity contest and having certain types of kids sort of rise to the top every time and not.
Isn't that kind of a trip up of democracy in general?
I think it's also quite a commitment, right? So
Yeah.
it's a certain type of kid who wants to do this work. Merrick has goals to be in politics, as we all know. And so not every kid, I think, is, in terms of the popularity piece, is going to want to make a commitment to the type of commitment Merrick and Zach have made.
Yeah.
But it is such a glamorous job.
It is glamorous. And I do see, Merrick with his followers. So,
Maybe we could make it, I don't know if you guys talked about this, I think we might have talked about this a little bit, and not making it just at the high school, but maybe if it was an election between the middle or high school or something like that, then it would take that student outside of their, I guess, natural zone. So it would have to go, convince students at the other school anyway.
Mhm.
So that's an idea.
So
I'm sorry.
you first, please.
I was gonna ask, the 2-year thing, it sounds good, but wouldn't that preclude kids who are in the senior year wanna, do this?
Yeah, or they could finish up if another student didn't finish their 2 years, just like we sort of do, where someone completes their term, that would be possible. But no, you're right, that would,
Yeah, usually you do. Like for one of the working groups that I serve, we have 4 students and seniors can apply. And we know, and that's even though it's a 3-year term, we know that they're gonna phase out. They can choose to remain just because that's part of what, but most of them left. So now we're back into appointments because they were all seniors. So, which is fine, but they give it all.
I don't know how complicated this might get, but what if Zach and Merrick, what if we have a special situation for this year and we have a junior specifically who through some petition, like juniors get petition signatures of some kind so that there's some democratic aspect to it. And then board and the current members or the current student members are part of the selection process. And we have 3 for the remainder of this year. And then the junior next year becomes a senior and we have a junior the following year. I don't know if that's way too complicated, but it might create a process that can replicate itself.
I still want to give opportunity to freshmen to apply there. We have some eager freshmen.
Yeah, it might not just have to be a junior, it could be anyone in the lower grades.
But 2-year term.
Yeah, I feel like 1 year is a fairly good amount of time. And my only concern with moving to a 2-year model is back to what I had originally said about giving offering the opportunity to more students. And, there were, I think, 6 applicants. Is that right? 6 applicants last time?
5 or 6.
Mhm.
Around that.
So, there was some other students on that applied last time that I would be interested in giving a shot, before they graduate. And if we move to a 2-year model, then it's limiting their ability to ever have a possibility of serving on the school board.
And we could have we could do a 1-year model where we don't preclude someone from the ability to do it again if they want to.
Right,
And,
exactly.
Yeah.
Do you think it might make sense for me and Merrick and Zach and whoever else is interested, but to meet and discuss this outside of the board meeting about how to move forward? And I am really interested in the possibility of pursuing some sort of subcommittee, or maybe we don't call it a committee of the board. We can call it sort of a working group or student, listening council for our board members, something like that. But we could work with Matt to create something like that. Does that sound like a good next
That sounds
step?
awesome. Thank you for taking that on.
Is having elections gonna affect one way or the other? Is it gonna put a lot of burden? Is that on the school or the logistics of having an election?
That's a Google form.
Yeah.
I can't see it. We can do it in TA. I can't see it being a huge.
And maybe the
That's good to know.
elections,
Thank you for asking.
That's
Yeah.
good to know.
maybe
They're
like
not gonna wheel
elections
in.
becomes like one metric, we consider. Well, it's almost like, or the 2 student reps could have an actual vote in who, I don't know, something like that, where there could be the elections, the results of the elections could count as like 3 votes or something. I feel like there could be some way to use both. Yeah.
There's a lot of work to be a politician, go get your vote, and then you're gonna be like overwritten by the current members. So,
Yeah.
The School Boards Association has a guide to student voice. I thought they might have some guidance. So if there are folks looking at it,
The school boards has varying ways you can engage student voice, including how to actually prepare and help support student board members.
Excellent.
I feel like that's new.
Like
Because I
it.
think we reached out to them when we were considering having student board members. They were talking about hosting some sort of conference for student board members, but it was all still in the works. So I'm not sure if that has come to fruition also.
Speaking of which, if you want to come, American, pointing at you, if you want to come to the VSBA, VSA conference,
What is this?
come talk to me about it tomorrow.
I will.
Merrick's like, yes, I do.
Excellent. So Emma and Merrick and Zach are gonna do some brainstorming about options. And we will take this up later, but thank you for considering that, because it's the participation of student reps has certainly made these meetings better, and it's a perspective we definitely need, so. Next, board discussion of budgetary themes for administration to consider when brainstorming financial priorities, and discussion of presentations the board would like prior to budgetary decisions. And this is really just going to kind of be a free-form brainstorm of what we need from the administration to help us make the best budgetary decisions coming in. So I will just open up the floor. I definitely have some ideas, but I will open it up. Brett.
Well,
I took your big inhale as
yeah, I
desire
mean, I
to
kind of
speak.
brought this up the last meeting. We don't know what the outcome of the new weighting system will be, but I'm a worst case scenario kind of guy.
Yeah.
Because that's feels to me like it provides at least a sort of a framework for thinking. So I don't know if others agree, but I wouldn't mind a worst case scenario outlook, not to take a whole meeting or anything, but even if it was just a brief thing.
That'll definitely be part of our budget discussions. And I actually reached out to Christina today, and they're talking, Christina's a part of a group called VASBO, which is thank you. And VASBO is getting a presentation on Friday about it, or discussing it this Friday. And I know that they're also VSA, VSBA, and VPA, or Vs, are all working on a goal to create a common webinar PowerPoint for everybody to come out end of September, beginning of October. So I think it's a kind of like, we'll all know at the same time what the implications are for this, but we don't know yet exactly, other than what they modeled in the original forecasting.
The other part of that is the pie chart that has like this is set and this is our wiggle room. That just, I know it's in there all the time, but like just to reiterate again for all of us that are sort of new or not fully into it, but there's a lot of sort of set costs. And then there's a space where there's flexibility that spans across a variety of different areas in the budget, and sort of reiterating where the flexibility is and where the flexibility is not would also be benefit to me.
And I'll just speak, but related to that, I mean, I would love to really see kind of between the student weighting numbers, but also just with our student numbers in general, and particularly the lower numbers at UES, like what are the needs and kind of what are the projected out needs? And what are some ways you're thinking about, shifting resources? Is that an opportunity to shift resources from the classroom to, more support for more support for learning, especially for not just special ed, but for the, the students that fall just above the IEP that we know have been failing historically. Just what are the projections there? And how are you thinking about, best using human resources to meet the needs of students? Amanda?
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of talk of infrastructure, so like, and just thinking of pie chart way, I guess, like kids who are struggling, but so I'm more like the glass full kind of girl instead of the negative. So like here, like the needs that we have, like thinking big about the needs and thinking about the kids who are behind a little bit, and what are we funding right now? So like, and then infrastructure needs, all of it, just like a pie chart. This is all we need in infrastructure. This is what we need to support kids that are falling behind who are not necessarily in a special education dollars, and this is the rest.
So can I paraphrase
Yeah.
my understanding of what I think you just said?
Mm-hmm.
Almost like here are buckets and the amount of money we spend in each bucket that include infrastructure, social emotional learning, perhaps, intervention, special education. Am I on the right track?
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe to add, like where money comes from. So like some of it is our budget, right? Like we're gonna vote on it as people, but then like maybe the special ed funding formula that's coming in, and like what might be from outside that doesn't necessarily have to be from the general fund.
Emma?
So I think you kind of are or Grant was pretty good, or you collectively were pretty good about doing this in the past in your presentations. But I think something that would be really helpful for board members, but also the community at large, is sort of a refresher course in some of the themes that have been brought up many, many times in all the listening sessions, and what we put into place to address those needs already that are, so just, I had mentioned at the last meeting that I was at a middle school meeting, and that there was a lot of things that they had not heard of yet that I would like for us to advertise more widely, that these are the things we're doing for social emotional learning, impact of pandemic on learning loss, that these are the things that we put into place already in the current budget.
So almost like a past greatest hits, if you will.
Exactly. Highlight reel.
The montage. We need the montage, the look back montage.
Amanda?
Emma, what if we summarize those questions for Lily? Like, I think that a lot of us are like, we've heard this, we heard that, but it's not like, we're just kind of like, we want to know. Like, I think we need to come up with, okay, here's what we've heard from the community. And so that we can plan, okay, this is how we're responding, more so like that in these meetings, because it's like, so we know that literacy, mental health support systems, and whatever. So like we should come up with like, here are the specific questions, just because it's broad and there's so many things we've heard. So like that.
I wonder if it'd be useful, not to have a report, but almost have like a 2 or 3 page fact sheet that just kind of identifies like what we've done with the pandemic, kind of where we're coming out, where we're investing. We're doing this for social emotional learning. We're doing this for infrastructure. We've done these things with federal funds, just that we could, post and just very easily educate the community, just have it be real simple, bullet pointy. But really just kind of, we're coming out of this. Here's a reset. Here's how we've dealt with some of the, some of the losses we've had, some of the challenges. Here are the investments we've made. Here are the investments we're making.
Yep. We have a few documents where we consolidated community feedback from listening sessions and such.
Yeah,
So
those are still on our website.
yeah, so I mean, that could be a starting point, but I'm happy to distill that with you if you want to do that.
Or we can create something and send it to all of you. You give feedback and then we'll give it. We just need a deadline. Give me a deadline.
Deadline of
When to
maybe like a week.
Well, no, you have more than a week.
Try to shoot for.
I think mid-October would be great.
Oh, that's a long time.
Yeah,
That's too
well-
long.
But at the last
the
board
next board
meeting, yeah, at the last board meeting, one of the things we talked about was where does the community engagement fit into this process before that first, earlier than that first draft budget presentation. And I think it would be helpful if we had that distillation of what we've heard, and then we actually bring that to the community in a couple of different venues. Like I'm thinking we've got the fall festival coming up, the school board, we could have school board representation there again this year where we say, this is what we've heard from the community. Do you have anything to add, or what would you +1, or like that kind of thing? And that there could be another couple of places where we get that kind of feedback, like caregiver alliance meetings or something like that. And then we'd get that to you by the middle of October.
I think Brett wants to dress up as a bee to get that
I think
feedback.
he would relish
that earlier.
dressing up. as a
Seiji, are
bee.
you still going to farmers markets regularly?
No.
Okay. We
He's like, I'm saying as far away as
took a little bit of
possible.
a summer hiatus on that.
Well, I can tell you that I can do a first draft of questions from the community vision in the next 2 weeks.
And I can help you with that.
Okay.
I have a lot of flexibility over the next couple of weeks.
Okay. You want to do it?
With you together. Yes.
I'll find the document.
I do think we got a really good presentation from you earlier this year that I felt like drew the connections between like what were the federal funds that we used for to
Yeah.
target those things. Like I think that is already largely done.
Yeah.
So maybe
And
looking
that's
at that
always
again.
Part of our budget presentation around.
And it even
it's
helped how
under
you're like, well,
revenues,
we
yeah.
could use this for federal dollars, but since we have this eligible cost, we did this and that let us be nimble about. I think that I remember feeling really impressed and well informed after that presentation about those things.
Other things we would like to see, and definitely it is now, so that the administration has time to prepare. Is there anything you would like to tell us?
No, I don't want to tell you anything right now.
This might be a comment for us as a board, but I think one of the lessons that we learned this last year is it felt kind of funny that we did go through this process. We had our budget set, and then at some point we're like, oh, but wait, we want to use up our fund balance quick, and we had a track idea. And so which it's all's well that ends well, but it felt a little strange that we had like these surprise things, or like it turns out we do have a little money under the table and now we need to spend it soon. Like I'm hoping we don't. I'm not articulating this well.
Don't make it sound like it was petty cash.
The fund balance. But it
Or
felt a little
don't.
strange to be really diligent and thoughtful about developing a budget. And then it turns out we did have money when something sort of came up out of left field. So either, I think we talked about in the past that like, if we do kind of have those things that might be coming down the pike, like if we did need to use our fund balance, here are some priorities as a board that we would want to spend that money on. I feel like maybe there is that kind of list, like maybe there's a facilities list, or Grant had a list, or you guys have a list, or teachers have a list, but that it felt a little strange to kind of let something cut the line when maybe we should have some thoughts if we are in that position again, that we've already put some thought into.
I think that's a great idea to have a priority for extra petty cash. I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
I can say from the community input piece to the budget, we just went through an enormous visioning piece that gave lots of themes and
Right,
perspectives.
exactly.
I mean, you all can disagree with me, but I think that we have a lot of community input for this budget scenario that I'm not sure you're going to get different information over the last year and then the visioning process that Nathan just finished. So I would give yourself a little freedom there. I think.
But, and also I think we brought this up before, people like to hear from us but they don't like to hear from us every week with the same question.
Yeah.
I think part of it is that we are gonna have this question about what's gonna happen with the pupil witness study and all the other formulas that are coming down. So I think what this process is gonna do is we're gonna say, here's all the priorities, here are all the needs that our students have, that our families have. And here are all the things I'm just saying, now the negative part, like we're gonna have to cut because of this, for example. And so instead of people being surprised, there's a big picture that people already have. And so like as much as we can be transparent around that, so that when and if we do suffer, and the administration has to make decisions about some of the things that, or like the budget doesn't pass, like people have a picture that they're voting with their values around, like, we're not going to give you mental health because we don't want to pay extra taxes. And you're going to say, okay, well, these are the kids in your community. So I think like that's how you get your community's buy-in, is by showing that big picture of like, this is what we have and this is the reality with the state and our taxes.
Yeah, kind of just echoing that. I mean, I wasn't here last time when there was the budget being put together, but just making sure that the community is pretty aware of the budget process and making sure that as much as encouraging as we can to get community members here. Let's try to do that, I think. And also, I'm sure you probably will, but taking the visioning survey results and really considering those throughout the budget process.
Yeah, I think most community members have two questions about the budget. How's it going to impact my kid? And how's it going to impact my property tax?
Yeah, most definitely.
I just think like, yeah, more transparency with that.
What's the reappraisal?
It's happened.
It's
hasn't it?
happened, yeah.
That's Jill's
Yeah,
wheelhouse.
so I think
Yeah.
it would
It
be,
certainly happened in the bill I got.
yeah. Well, shouldn't have shown up yet. It
Something
should
showed
be-
up.
It should be completed this spring, right? So next year's tax bills should reflect the new values.
Oh, that's interesting. So it won't be on this year's budget though. This year's budget presentation, the
The Montpelier CLA will still be the old CLA. Yeah. I could be wrong. Now you guys are really making me question myself. I don't know.
okay, Jill, you got a job
I'll
to
look
do.
into that.
Maybe we could better advertise the budget timeline that's in our board calendar. Like if we post that to Facebook and to social media and then on Front Porch Forum, just so that we've like put it out there. These are the meetings that we're having, these different conversations. You know?
The only challenge I would see to that is that it's a living document and that like, so for instance, fall literacy math data is right now slated for November 2nd, right? That could change.
Mhm.
And so I don't want somebody put that on their calendar and it happens on the 16th instead, and then somebody comes to the board meeting on the 2nd without having with, like it's just such a living document that gets revised a lot.
Right.
And it is on board agendas, so.
I wonder if we just share the living document.
Or what if we just do a little flyer that we post everywhere that says, we're starting budget season, make sure you're following our agendas, here's how you follow when we're gonna be, and dates might change when we're gonna be talking about it, but pay attention to it. Because people are like, oh, school board, but
Right.
if they, so we can put them from board forum, budget season starting, conversations are happening. Make sure you're checking the school board page for updates and how to get involved or how to bring your voice or whatever. So just do.
So the reappraisal is, according to Montpelier's webpage, is to be completed for the 2023 grand list. So for next year's grand list. And usually the year there's a reappraisal, you could estimate that the CLA would be 100. I think that's usually what we just give them.
You'll let us know. That's an important number.
Yeah.
A couple of things for me that are a priority based on what we've been hearing, and I know that we're planning to look at the community feedback anyway as a primary way to know what themes to address in the budget. So it's redundant, but I'll just sort of add some snaps to special education has been a recurring theme that we've heard about, and that feels like a priority to me to talk about some of the things that I know we've put into place in the current budget and the current school year to address some of those concerns. And then if those things will stay for the next budget cycle, or if we will add to them, that conversation is important for me to hear. Restorative justice, which kind of relates to all of the safety in schools and bullying complaints that we've been hearing from the community, but dating way back to when we were working at the school safety committee. That was a major theme in our stakeholder feedback, was encouraging the schools to move forward with restorative justice. And I know there's been some action on that. I'd like to hear, sort of where we stand, what we've done so far, what we're planning to do, and whether that will be something that will be highlighted in next year's budget.
Things we'd like to see. I think I'm gonna say that you're probably open for ideas. If you want to email you some things they've forgotten about. Yeah, I think we're ready to move on a few minutes early. Retreat agenda. So we have a retreat coming up the 19th from 4 to 8. Thanks, folks, for being flexible, and also thanks for suggesting that nighttime thing. In terms of kind of the agenda that Livy and I have thought out, Heather Lynn, who is a member of the firm that represents the district, is available to do a 1-hour training to really kind of walk us through the basics of hazing, harassment, and bullying, and kind of what that means and what the obligations of the district are, what the rights of all parties involved are, what the district has to do, what the legal definitions are, the findings that have to be made, the privacies that have to be protected, et cetera. Which I think would be just a really good basis, because it's complicated stuff and it's not necessarily intuitive. And then what we're thinking is that the next hour, Livy and her staff could kind of do a presentation just talking about what they do in terms of implementation, answer questions, et cetera, with the idea that, I think it's very clear that there are some specific situations we've heard about from the community that cannot be discussed in public and cannot be discussed in detail. So with the parameters that, that there are questions we shouldn't ask and answers that the administration can't give, that we'll try to get as much information about, what they're doing, how they're implementing, what the processes are, ways the process can be improved. I think Libby's already working on some ways to make the website more user-friendly for families that are involved in hazing, harassment, and bullying, and to try to make the process more transparent. But we can talk about that. And then spending 2 hours with Nathan, kind of doing a deep dive on the visioning process and next steps there, and how we can really kind of move towards ends that can help guide us through this budget process, but kind of through all our major decisions. So that was kind of the parameters. Libby and I didn't talk about this in depth, but I think we should also put some sort of food delivery.
Oh, yeah, well.
Yeah. Okay. I was assuming that, which is, so we can, eat, because it's an awkward time.
Always important.
It is important. Love thoughts on whether that sounds like the right mix and the right amount of time. Obviously we can continue the conversations as I'm sure we will on both of those topics, but given the amount of community concern over HHB, and obviously concern among the board, as well as the amount of time we spent on the visioning process, it seems like taking that extra time to educate ourselves and move those conversations along seems like a good use. I mean, the original idea we had an August retreat was visioning, but I think that was we heard from the community, and I think given what we've heard from Nathan, I think 2 hours for that should be adequate to get us the next steps. So love to hear thoughts, whether that makes sense to people, or whether we should make some tweaks and adjustments.
Go ahead. I have a question about the ends. This is more, or are they kind of like evergreen, in that it's not like we wouldn't at the end of those 2 hours say these are our goals for this year or these next 2 years. They're more a little bit like broad.
Yes.
They're like year after year after year, this is what the district is striving toward.
Yes.
Okay.
And they should be big.
Right.
Big,
Okay.
based on values.
Fine.
I just wanted to make sure I understood what we meant by that.
They're like guiding lights in the horizon that are very the type of things that 10 years from now we might look at them and say, well, we want different things because things have changed, but they're not like we're going to do these 5 things in the next year.
And so from those, we would then have a different time period. Maybe it would happen during a board meeting, because we wouldn't have time for it at the retreat if we had this agenda, where we would say, okay, given that those are our ends, this is what we're going to focus on as a board or as a district for the next year or two, where they'd be a little bit more concrete, and like, okay, there'd been more like a timeline and a work plan toward them.
Yeah.
Is that kind of how that would work? Okay.
I mean, there's things that would guide, like if we were to set goals for a year, or, goals for Libby, or are we going to make a big investment? They're the type of things like, are these consistent with their ends? Are these consistent with kind of the bigger values of the district?
Okay.
Like the previous ends that we had, I'll just read the first couple. So you get students master a core body of knowledge based on reliable measurements, such as state standards and locally developed assessments. We probably wouldn't want that. We probably want something about, student learning, but individual students at all ages and ability levels engage in rigorous, relevant, inspiring learning, which prepares them for success in school and beyond. Those type of things.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, these are a little dated. I think these came from, the early 2000s, or maybe even earlier. But those type of things that have some staying power.
And we would have Nathan facilitate the conversation during the retreat, where we would use what we learned through the visioning process to help us determine what those ends are.
Exactly.
That's what you're, okay.
Yeah, and then I think
Uh-huh.
another thing that kind of came out of the Nathan conversation was, taking some of that community input and kind of putting a value, context on it. For instance, we heard a lot about student behavior and, some people expressed, I think, a desire for kind of more traditional discipline and consequences. And we also heard a lot about, more restorative practices that kind of, I think, reflect more current thinking. The board, we heard all of that, and there's some kind of, value decisions that I think the board can overlay about, well, what really is the consensus of how we want our district to go. And I think giving some shape to that too.
Okay. Well, I'll just say, just for that piece of the retreat, that does seem like a good next step. I don't think it's like, this is sort of what Amanda was saying at the last board meeting. I think it's ongoing work,
yeah.
But that seems like those 2 hours would be time well spent for the next piece of what we have to do.
Amanda.
I'm wondering if there's a way to also connect what we did in the last retreat. Somehow it just like feels like we had some work on the process, and I think that's really important that we need to also consider. It can just be like we need to kind of get to a point where we have those processes kind of set up. So I'm not sure how to connect that. Other than that, I would love to see Nathan's all the meta data to look at all the things beforehand. In terms of the HHB, I am trying to find the balance between the conversation of how do we protect the school district and how to protect the students, and mix those. I think Heather Lynn's presentations is very like this is the school district's responsibilities and things they need to do. And I'm trying to think of also the board as this bridge to the community and to families and students, and how do we respond, right? Like we know that some things are not going to be in policy, and that there's more like a culture of a community that needs to change, and like what is our response to that. So I think so. It's part of the U.S. Caregivers Alliance at UES. There was a lot of conversation about what we can do, and there's some like great ideas around there. Adrian and Mel and they're doing a lot of work that they're kind of saying, please don't leave this up to me by myself. And I just really want to make sure that we're not going to do that. And that out of this retreat, we come up as a board, not only saying, yes, we have this policy in place, here's some of the work that the administration is going to do, but what is the stand that we are going to take as a board to say in Montpelier-Roxbury school districts, bullying is not okay. And like, this is what the board can do. And outside of the procedures and policies that needs to be in place. I think that the school safety committee was an example. Like, here's something that we wanted to do. There's like a community came together and we listened and we shared feedback as a response. The SRO was off, some more mental health support systems came in place. So like, can we think of HHB as that as well? Like, here's a system that is mandated by the state that might be working or not, but we have to follow that policy and procedure. But what else can we do? So I think that's the conversation I would love to have to come out of that retreat, to say, as a board, this is, the things we can do as to support our communities in this.
I think that all makes sense. And I kind of envision the second part of that, where the administration comes in and we kind of ask questions, like the ability to kind of tee that up, see what are we actually doing? I mean, I do think it's important, for Heather to come in. I know it might seem somewhat legalistic, but like, we have to understand the beast that we're dealing with. And what the limitations are, and then start asking those questions. That's, I think I'm very in line with, I think, the second part is hearing from the administration and starting, to ask, what is the culture and where are the points that we can make changes, and what are we doing that's working? What are we doing that's not working? Where are some areas that we can provide more support and more improvements, and, and do culture change. Right.
Is it possible to have any kind of summary of sort of a historical perspective of how things have looked, or is that not really known? I don't, because I don't know what kind of a, not like historical, like across the country or anything like that, but just sort of, is there a community perception of, like, I've heard that there's an ongoing culture, say at MSMS, that preceded certainly you, that I don't know how far it goes back. I don't know exactly what is being referenced there. I don't know if that's possible to sort of go into, or any kind of summary of a sort of thematic, I don't know, to give me a clue.
Can we look at data by HHB? That's in the state. Well, there's some data, no,
From my tenure, not from before me.
but we can look at that thing.
It's also skewed because of COVID. So,
It's hard to do.
yeah, I mean, we can't, you have to look at that data with the eyes of, we were in a global pandemic and incredibly controlled circumstances for
I was
a
thinking
year and a
even
half at
more,
least.
even more historical and less data, less factual, more perception. Whether that exists, whether there's any access to sort of a community perception of there being challenges. I mean, it's middle school, has that stigma across the country for sure. And I just don't know if there are any specific sort of community specific perceptions of MS, or if that's not really possible to do in any kind of fair way. Okay, fair enough.
Somebody like Jim, who has been around for a lot longer, can certainly speak, I think, from his perspective. But
Yeah, and I mean, this year definitely is the year I've heard the most about these issues.
So it's not really accessible.
Yeah, it's not,
Yeah.
and
I didn't know if it was. You get that what I'm looking for in a way, right?
yeah, I understand what you're looking for, and I
But
would
you
love
weren't
to be
there.
able to give it to you, but
You weren't
there's
there, so.
very
Would
limited
there-
information
would it be
prior to my
helpful,
tenure.
like any of the questions in that, I'm forgetting what it's called right now, but the student survey, the student like health survey, youth risk behavior survey. Would there be any questions in there that potentially Rhett or others could access that might be interesting, an
can
interesting
look.
data point?
I don't know. I could look. I
Yeah,
don't know how many years back we can access either.
right,
I know that it was given the year we closed and we never got that data.
right.
They never didn't, if they got it, they never shared it with us. So that's going back to 2019. But we could certainly look at it.
Yeah.
yeah, and there's like, there is anecdotal stuff. I remember, who was the principal before Mike McCraith? Adam Bunting?
Yeah.
Yeah, when he left, one of the things he said was, when he came in, the rumor around MHS was that it had no clicks. And he's like, how can a high school have no clicks? He's like, there's not a high school in the world that has no clicks. And he said when he left, his conclusion, that it had no clicks. And when he left, his conclusion was, actually it does. It has one big click. And then there are a few students who are very on the outside of that click. So, there's clearly have been like, some issues through the years that have popped up. And definitely some students that, I think have been marginalized and felt marginalized. And also just, anecdotally, there's huge culture differences class to class. I think some classes have behavioral challenges that other classes just don't. And that's also benefiting. Yeah.
I just want to try and bring us back to the retreat agenda. I think we're getting a little bit off course. And I want to second what Amanda was saying, that I would really love to be able to, if not come out of the retreat, then soon after in a continued conversation, be able to say, here's what the board has identified we're able to do to help students feel more included and belonged and safe at school. Because throughout the conversations that we've been having so far, I've felt frustrated as an individual board member that there's not more we can do to fix this, that's just what I would really love to be able to do is fix this. And I know that we can't do everything to fix it. But what I'm hearing from, as far as the draft agenda goes, I also understand that it is important for the board to understand what the policy says we can and cannot do. And so then what the procedures are. So I get that, spending some time on that to kind of give ourselves that foundation, and then hearing from the district staff on what they do when a situation arises. This is what I was hearing you say, Jim, is like, we would hear from them, not certainly in any specifics, like we called such and such parents or anything like that, but here's what we do when a situation arises, and giving us an opportunity to ask administrators what would support a culture change, because we recognize that policy alone can't do it, and how can the board help, I think would be really helpful to engage in that conversation with our administrators. I don't think that we're going to be able to get to that. Like I don't think we're going to be able to leave the retreat and be able to send out a message to the community like, okay, now we've got, but I think it could get us in the right direction. And given that we only have 4 hours total, and I agree, we'd need to spend some of that time on determining these ends for the district. I think to me, this seems like we would be doing, spending our time well in these 4 hours and teeing up more good conversations to happen.
Yeah, and what I'd really like, and I think you kind of hit on this, is for us to really have an understanding of what what the administration thinks of when they think of hazing, harassment, and bullying, and then get a sense of what the community thinks of when they think of that. And are there disconnects, and are there ways to bridge those disconnects? Because there might be situations the community is coming to us where they think it's a bullying situation, and teachers in the classroom might have a different take on what that means, and it might be informed by the way they've been taught to understand hazing, harassment, bullying. It might have to do with procedures around it. So under us to really understand, I think, the multiple perspectives, because we have heard a lot from the community. I don't think we've heard a lot from the administration yet about what they're doing and how it looks through their eyes and what processes they put in place.
It will be helpful to have that perspective and to hold on to, maybe not too tightly, those actual words, but to make sure that if we're hearing from caregivers, if they're using the word bullying, but it doesn't sort of quote unquote meet the definition, at least what can understand is we are hearing they're feeling their child isn't feeling included and feeling safe. And so that is a big gap between the sort of legal definition of bullying and how a child is feeling and their ability to access their education in school. Anyway, there's more to be had in that conversation.
And what's going on too, I mean, I'm just putting this out hypothetically, but is part of it that teachers are saying, oh, kid's being mean, but it's not bullying. And, that story comes home and it sounds like a situation that needs to stop and needs to be addressed. I'm not saying that's happening, but it would be nice to know if that is, things like that are happening. Amanda.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Is there a way that everybody can just think through what can the board do, and just like have something beforehand? Like maybe we can collate one document where like we just put a lot of ideas that we can come prepared to talk about, and like questions around, if legal is not bullying, there's something underlying that we still need to shift. It's not, bullying is, it's like right here, but there's a lot that is happening right here before it gets to that point. Same as harassment, right? Like there's a lot that you look at the pyramid of hate, there's a lot of things that begin very small that then kind of lead up to where we need to, so like, what are the things?
Okay.
Just thinking about that, Amanda, I would like to know what the district is doing so that I can then make an informed decision. Oh, yeah, you're doing that. Oh, you're doing this already. Oh, you could do this more, rather than me just going in and saying, oh, yeah, I've heard from people from outside, and then we should do this without hearing from what district is doing first. And so this retreat would help me identify those things, right? Hey, what are you guys doing? Where do you think are the gaps? If you think there are the gaps, or if you think that you're falling short, which are those areas that you're falling short? And then as a collective, we can say, okay, what we can do about it. We can help. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah.
I had a format question. It's a public meeting, right? Our retreat, certainly. I'm wondering if we could arrange the room differently, so we're not putting administrators there as if they're in sort of like some
Wait,
sort of.
do you want all the administrators here from 4 to 8 that night?
No, during this part of the conversation.
Do you want them there?
Oh, I don't, do we need them here the whole time?
You just said they were going to be here, so. I'm just curious because I haven't told them that they're coming to that, so I need to tell them like ASAP if they want.
Yeah, I mean, I
Oh,
think,
that's what I
you know,
heard.
or whatever you feel is the best team, or, I mean, if it's you to, you know, present this.
I was gonna ask Jess Murray to come,
Yeah,
Director of Social Emotional Learning.
yeah, I mean, I think whoever you think is the best person who can kind of speak to the broadest range of issues, and no, I don't think whoever that is needs to be here for the whole meeting.
Definitely doesn't need to be here for the whole meeting. But I guess it would be helpful to know for the administrators who are the ones tasked with following through on procedures and who are the ones in the buildings day to day. These, you know, to get those perspectives. And, you know, if they just want to pop in on Zoom, I mean, I'm guessing that would be principals and assistant principals.
I think what I would do is do an anonymous survey of the administrators.
Okay.
Because I
Yeah.
think there's some trust issues there for a public open meeting
Yeah.
that would hinder their responses.
Yeah. That's understandable.
Does that make sense?
I think it would be, yeah.
I think you get better responses.
And also you have new people.
Yeah.
We also.
That's true.
With fresh eyes.
Yeah.
We're looking at it with fresh
Yeah.
eyes.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
which is good.
Well, maybe this is a moot point then, but I was just picturing if, for example, if Jess comes, I don't think we need it to be like we're all interrogating her sitting at that one table there, but if we could set up the room so that she was joining us at the,
Yeah,
you
we
know,
could-
I'm
we
just
could-
giggling knowing Jess.
We'd just be-
She'd hate that.
I would hate it too.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not a situation where I want anyone to feel even remotely like they're in sort of a hot seat or anything like that. What we're just trying to do is understand what's
Yeah.
going on.
we
Same
can-
for Heather Lynn. If she's gonna be here in person, let's have her sit at the table with us. I don't know.
We'll have a different
Did
setup.
she come in person?
Heather Lynn's is board trainings are done in executive session. Board trainings are not a public meeting.
Yeah, but
Right.
the other part would be public, so
Yeah.
we'd be in executive session for an hour.
Oh, okay.
Um,
From 4 to
and-
5.
And probably just go into the room 126 and.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
and Heather's coming for the
Yeah.
first part.
Yeah, and I don't think Heather will mind getting grilled if you choose to grill her. But we definitely want it to be a friendly atmosphere for everyone, even lawyers.
Okay.
Other questions or comments on the agenda?
Thank you for moving the date and time.
Hi, welcome. No, thanks for the suggestion. That works. I'm glad that yeah, these are important topics and it's good to get everyone's participation. Committee updates.
Go to the next board discussion. We have 3 board discussions
Oh.
today.
Woohoo.
Do you have the old agenda in front of you?
Oh, yeah, I do see the board discussion. So I sent an email around about this when it first popped up, and then you saw the letter that Libby and I sent to.
We haven't sent it yet.
Oh, we haven't sent it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That was sent.
Yep.
that we are proposing to send to the Agency of Education.
The State Board of Education.
Yeah, State Board of Education, thank you. I think this one is a no-brainer. I don't see how a merger with Lincoln makes sense in any way, shape, or form. But we wanted to run it by the board to see if there are any thoughts or differing opinions, also just to make sure that you know this is out there. My understanding is that there are some remote possibilities that this could be forced upon us. And also, I think Lincoln is reaching out to a lot of other potential suitors.
About 8.
Yeah,
on my list.
they've created a difficult situation for themselves. Yeah. So, thoughts on the letter? Thoughts on the approach? Jill?
I support the letter. I thought it was well articulated and I'm very comfortable with it being sent.
Other thoughts?
So,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
so if I understand correctly, it's not a decision that is in our hands. We can just express our opinion and then they make the decision, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we said we'd love to merge with you, it would probably facilitate it happening.
Okay.
But yes, ultimately, it's a decision of the board distinctly. But I think they will consider the practicalities, including whether it is a welcome or sensible thing from the perspective of the perhaps forced marital party.
It's actually in Lincoln, Vermont.
It's in Lincoln, Vermont.
So it's
Yeah.
hard to get to Roxbury from Lincoln. Montpelier would be crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I don't know if you've been up kind of the Lincoln Gap Road, but
Closed in the
it's
winter.
hard to get over on a nice day in
It's
summer.
nice turning there.
Is did they reach out to even talk or about this?
What happened was, I don't know, about a month ago, a few weeks ago, Lincoln's board chair reached out surprisingly to me to say, hey, you want to merge and become a SU? Or can we contract your services, your central office services? Because those are their two options, right? They find a central office who's going to work for them, or they merge with a supervisory union or force a school district to become a supervisory union. And to be clear, those are two very different things.
Do you want to explain what a supervisory union is? first?
Yeah, so a supervisory union is each school is its own district. And then, so each school has its own board. So if we were a supervisory union, Roxbury would have a board, Union would have a board, you know, like that's how it could work, right? And then usually there's a union high school that also has a board. So where I came from, Franklin, what was Franklin Northwest Supervisory Union, that was it. Swanton had a board and Highgate had a board and Franklin had a board. And then they had a union board for the high school. And they also had a supervisory union board. So there are multiple boards happening within the district. They merged and now only have one, right? With representatives from each of those towns. So what Lincoln was suggesting, and they erroneously put in their letter to the State Board of Education that we already were a supervisory union, that we, like, they have no desire to be part of our school district. They would like us to be a supervisory union where we would now have 3 boards for our governing structure. We would have this board, we would have a Lincoln board, and we would have a supervisory union board, which would have members of this board and Lincoln's board together. In the monetary situations, so I have Christina here in case you have any monetary or financial questions around that, because it becomes much grander in scheme, because Lincoln would influence the supervisory union budgetary decisions, correct?
So there would be 3 budgets.
Yeah.
3?
3.
3 budgets.
And none of those
With the
budgets, just
same
because
staff.
it's one school, doesn't make the budget smaller. You know, like it's a smaller monetary amount, but it would be the same processes Christina does for our school district, just for that school. Like we'd have to increase our capacity of central.
Why would there be three?
The supervisory union would have its own budget, so the central office, including the business office, we'd have our own budget, so we're overseeing both districts. We'd be overseeing Montpelier-Roxbury.
Sure.
We'd also be overseeing Lincoln's budget. So those two districts would have to pay assessments to the supervisory union.
So then there'd be a Lincoln's budget, a MRPS budget, and a union budget is what you're saying, okay?
That's the model that I came from.
Okay.
Yeah, the 7 budgets. Oh, gosh, good lord.
So
Glad
we
to have
said, we said no to that, and did they still put it in their request? Is that how it went?
Yeah, my understanding, and Jim can speak to this, when the merger happened between Montpelier and Roxbury, there was a very conscious choice to be a school district.
Yeah.
And not a supervisory union. And that is what what Act 46 was supposed to do, was to create more school districts rather than supervisory unions.
But I think what Annica's saying is we politely declined.
We are politely declining.
Yes, but after you politely declined in your email, they then put us on the list that they sent to this State Board of Education.
Yes,
And that's how we are now on that list.
yes.
Is it possible for us to express our feelings to the State Board of Education, say we really don't want this to happen?
That's what this letter is.
Oh, I thought that went to the other district. Never mind.
No, this is for,
Okay,
so
right.
after the school board chair reached out to me, I answered her politely, succinctly, and
Okay.
with not a whole lot other than thank you, but no. I was surprised to get an email from the state board chair that said, you've been named as a possible partner for Lincoln by Lincoln. We would like reasons why or why not. That would be a merger, keeping in mind we can force this merger if we want to. So the more valid your reasons, the better off you'll be, essentially, is what I'm paraphrasing, but essentially is what it said.
Merrick.
Wait,
Joe.
so were there any other options for Lincoln anyway? Like, why would they come to us? Like, we're
Yep,
so far from
they've
them.
reached out to other districts and SUs.
Okay.
I don't know why they reached out to us. My hunch is it's because we have a small school already in our school district.
Okay.
So according to the state board meeting minutes, it looks like there's an issue where the Mount Abraham Unified Union School District is sort of struggling, and there's votes to either withdraw from the district or be reassigned. And so Lincoln, Ripton, Starksboro are all kind of trying to figure out their next steps. And it looks like 2 other supervisory unions have already sent very similar letters to what we have drafted about why it doesn't make sense to have those towns assigned to them. So basically I would strongly encourage us to send that, because it looks like barring any other options, then the state board will have to assign them somewhere and include funding, and it's a whole thing. So
I'm on it.
I make a motion to send a letter.
Haste
And say no to Lincoln.
Second.
Third.
That gives you wild discussions.
I was just wondering, don't the voters have any say in this? They
Not
can
if-
just force it and say this is what it is. And you
Yeah.
don't get a vote or anything?
The fact that we're not a supervisory union is very beneficial to us in this conversation, because it's a whole different governance structure. It's a whole different financial structure. I don't know if you have this version of it, but I added a paragraph after talking with Christina. We use e-finance. They don't. It's like we need to learn a whole different accounting system. Like so we have many things in our favor.
Yeah, but
Right here.
procedurally, we don't have to go to the community and get their input. Like we did with the MRPS merger.
No,
The community
this
had to
would be
approve that,
forced.
right? Yeah,
This would be
yeah.
forced.
Okay.
Jim, Emma's had her.
Oh, Emma, sorry.
I just want to say for the record that I have a lot of empathy for the position that Lincoln is in. And, small schools are, they struggle. And we all sort of watched the history of the forced merger movement that happened several years ago. And Montpelier was in a position at that time, our district was in a position at that time where we were not being forced to merge. So we had enough students in our district where we could have just said, we're good. We're just going to stay the same way that we are. And the way I saw it as a community member at the time was that it was pretty gracious and welcoming of us to be willing to invite one of these smaller schools that was being forced to merge into our district. And we're still pretty new. The MRPS district is still new. There's still growing pains. We're still working on what it means to have one school that's kind of far away and small. So I just feel really strongly that it's not the time or place now for our district to accept another small school into the district that's also at quite a distance from us. So I totally support the
And
letter.
to be clear, they're not asking to become a part of our district. They're asking us to become a supervisory union.
Yeah, it just feels too much, too fast. We're already still working on our relationship with Roxbury and how our new district that was formed, how many years ago?
5
5 years ago. So it feels like we've still got work to do on that. And so I support the letter, but I just want to express empathy, and I understand, I don't understand all of the inner workings of the state and when they force somebody to merge or when they force an assignment, but it doesn't feel good, for these small schools that are at the heart of these communities and mean a lot to the communities that they're in, that they can't just stand on their own, So I have an empathy for the position that they're in, but I support the letter.
Should be in all caps.
Oh, geez. More explanation.
Yeah.
To your point, it sounds pretty heartbreaking. Like when that district was forced to become a unified district, that's where school has closed. They've changed their model. Like they're really struggling under that. And so now the voters in some of these smaller communities are trying to get out of that agreement and go somewhere else. So
Exactly.
it is. Yeah.
It's hard, yeah. Yeah, but I agree with everything you said and it would be a much more complicated merger than
Oh, God,
Roxbury.
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, just given,
Yeah.
created a whole new structure and new governance. And
They're gonna give us $1 million a year for the next 5 years.
They're going to have to pay my per diem and that girl's per diem to do their work for them.
All right, vote on just to bless the letter. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, that passes.
Can I take a moment to just express some gratitude to the board and to Montpelier for letting Roxbury be part of the district? Just because it's not an easy task, and I appreciate it. And I'm on behalf of all the voters in Roxbury that voted for it, it means a lot.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, we're definitely very happy to have you as a partner.
And your students.
Committee updates, facilities, and then equity.
I could give a quick facilities one, and then other folks who are there could
Okay.
fill in where I mess up. Because Kristen is our chair, our intrepid chair, but she's not on here. So we just prior to this meeting had a really good facilities committee update. We got an update on the track. So basically, our facilities director, Andrew Rosa, and Matt Link, the athletic director, Principal Gingold, had a presentation for the committee by the contractors who are sort of putting together a proposal, who are responding to the RFP. So there's a firm that does the architectural work, and there's a specific subcontractor who concentrates on tracks. So they provided us with sort of a preliminary, here are the possible options. So literally sort of like, if we improve the track and add some lanes, if we improve the track, add some lanes, put in an artificial turf. If we move the fields around out here and move the track in different places, what does that look like and what does that gain us? The idea being that sort of what are all the sort of menu of options from, that we could choose from. And then my understanding is that they're going to go back and basically pull together an estimate for us on the track with site improvements that would provide for an artificial turf in the future, and a track and the artificial turf, so that this board has a sort of narrowed down version. It became pretty clear that like the actual moving of the track to a different part of this very tight parcel where we have a bike path and we have a river and we have a floodplain and we have parking, there's really very limited, it's like putting together a puzzle piece. So it just seemed like financially and logistically, especially because the time frame apparently needed for doing a track replacement in the summer in Vermont is really small as it is, because you're using it into June, and then it has to, once you put the the sort of base layer down, it has to cure for 30 days and then you can put the other stuff. So it's really already going to be a really tight timeline. And initially the sort of estimate is that doing the replacement of the track and adding the initial lanes, which will gain our track team a lot more sort of flexibility in how they host their pieces. If we add the artificial turf, it actually doubles the price. So I think those are just really realistic things. That's kind of why we want to bring to this group the options. So I got the sense that's coming along. I don't know if they really gave us a specific time frame, but working in earnest so that we can make an informed decision soon. And then the other two updates, I guess we skipped because we ran out of time.
Yep.
So we'll have another one, but
Yeah, the consultant said that if we were gonna do this next summer, we need to start making decisions soon and securing contractors and getting the ball rolling and getting some stuff signed.
Sorry, I lost my. Is there a is the net zero somewhere?
yeah, so we were supposed to spend the last 15 minutes of this meeting doing our RFP for the net zero.
Oh,
We
okay.
had to push it. We had a fair number of folks from the public too who were participating in this meeting. So that's why we were late coming here. It went
Great.
over. So that did get postponed.
I think that will, that topic will get our meeting.
Awesome.
When you say artificial turf, or you mean just like turf or just adding on lanes with the dirt still?
No. They're talking about turf. They're talking about the actual soccer field.
Oh,
Changing the
okay.
grass
Yeah.
of the
So
soccer field
track
to
is
turf.
one sort of entity, and then within that is the current grass field. And so the question is, while we're moving earth, do we want to upgrade or change that interior field? Because apparently artificial turf can extend the season, allow for use of the fields far more into the season, which allows for other fields to get sort of healed. It can even be used in the winter. But there are very real concerns about the cost, and then the environmental and possible impacts on student athletes, because there was some research shared by the consultant about there's some concern that those are actually create possibly more injuries. Yeah, and there's concern about, and not saying it's founded, I'm simply passing along. Recently, the Brattleboro Union High School District was looking into this, and they decided to shelve it. There were concerns about any sort of like chemical or PCB or PFAS or the sort of environmental impact, and it definitely does have a heating impact as well. That it adds about 10 degrees to the air right above it, so it means you'd want to have more things at night or in the morning. You'd have to so there are a lot of considerations to that if that's something you want to do. And frankly, that he was very sort of clear that it would double the cost. But that being said, if it gains us other things or, makes it, there are pros too, but.
So one option they're going to present is just the new track and then all the prep work that they'd have to do so that if we decide to change it to turf 5 years from now, all the drainage and all the infrastructure below there is already set up. So there's some work saved. So you don't have to rip up the track to put in the turf.
The board and the community should also be prepared that the board allocated $1.5 million to potentially, to earmark for the track. And it's pretty clear that even if we just do the track without the drainage option to allow for the potential of future turf to be installed, it most likely will be costing more than that $1.5 million, more in the range of $2 million. So when you're thinking about budget, it's, where does that $500,000 come from? And if we're looking at doing it for the next season or next year. I know there was a lot of testimony when we had people here to talk about the track that they would be willing to forego a season on our current track in order for the work to start earlier. So maybe that timeline doesn't have to be quite as tight as what they were outlining. But if we want to get this track installed, which I'm sure many of those people who were at that meeting, mostly the students, will want it as soon as possible, then we would need to make an actual decision in the next month and a half or so. And so we need to kind of know where that extra $500,000 would come from. And if we're doing the drainage, we don't know. That's a question mark budget. We don't know exactly how much that is going to add to the project.
And to answer your question, he was saying that we would really want to line up the installers by November or in November.
Right.
So we're talking
2 months.
this month and next month, we have to decide.
You said $2 million without the drainage, it's just a track, that's it.
Correct.
I mean, there were no hard numbers being presented.
Sure, sure.
But yes, in rough numbers, it's at least another $500,000 most likely to just have the track without the drainage for
Without anything
future
else,
term.
Yeah, just a track.
I think, did that include the storage shed or a few structures?
There's structures.
It was sort of the original plan that was
Right,
proposed
right.
to all of us that I think ultimately had like
It's like a garage.
$1,750,000 or something. I can't remember exactly what it said on the thing that was presented to us, but it looks like that will be more like 2.
Okay.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to add that will be interesting to consider. Where is that extra money coming from, especially since there's going to be less money moving forward, right? So just tough decisions.
I would, yeah, I'll go ahead.
I was just saying along with all the other priorities.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also important, like rushing decisions like this, where it's like you have to decide by November because you have to install is not good practice. Like, I don't think, especially when you still need money to be raised and that you don't know. Like, if it was like we have 1.5 million and that's how much it's gonna cost, and we can decide in November, the money's already there. But I do question like this idea that we're gonna have to decide within the next 2 months, and we still need to come up with 500,000 to be able to do something right. And there's some changes coming and priorities that we don't know. So just want to throw it out there, my skepticism already, so that it's not a surprise. That, we should think like, is it a capital campaign? Is it, like, what is it? Because we shouldn't be making decisions of money we don't have yet.
Great, thank you. Equity Committee, Mia?
So just wanted to make sure you all saw the email that Seiji sent on Monday. It's a draft version of the summary of the climate survey, and we're looking for board feedback on it. Your feedback could be, hey, I looked through the, combined results, and actually I came away with with some other strengths or gaps or whatever. And for that, please email Amanda only so that we're not having a conversation over email, and to share your feedback with the committee. Tomorrow I'll bump that email so it's at the top of everybody's inbox, and include, Libby shared with me the most recent climate survey we did. Now, please keep in mind that it was for the 2018-2019 school year. So 3 years have gone by, and there was a global pandemic during that time. So we're not sure exactly what kind of trends, and it was a different format. We used a different survey. So we're not sure exactly what kind of trends we'll be able to see, but it might be nice to compare those. And I think that was mostly it. Just wanted to make sure you all, 1, saw that, and 2, knew what we were asking of you by sharing it with you. Oh, the third part of this is, this summary is the completion of our sort of contractual obligation with the climate survey, because as part of the contract, it is that we will sort of report out what we've learned But then there's obviously a lot more that we can do with the survey and what we've learned in terms of using it to help make our budget decisions and prioritize things.
Excellent. Questions for Mia? I think that reminder was super helpful.
Not a question, but just to add that, just for you to keep in mind for that retreat conversation too. So that is part of like that.
So I think we're on to our final item, which is policy monitoring.
Just approve the.
To approve the policy monitoring of participation in home study students.
I move we
Susan.
approve the policy monitoring report of policy F10.
A second.
Any discussion? Seems pretty, yeah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent, passes. Wow, we're early. Motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, well, enjoy the extra 20 minutes.
We got through a lot of stuff.
We
there.
did.
That was yeah.
Like impressive, guys.
I'm starting to get the hang of this.
Yeah, yeah.